Good morning and welcome. Today is Friday, the 13th day of Elul. It is the day of the anniversary of the previous Rebbe's Chasana, the wedding of the previous Rebbe. And in that year also was the establishment of Tomchei Tmimim a few days later, the 15th day of Elul, the yeshiva that all the students go and spread out throughout the world today and transform the world. We started with the sounding of the shofar today because that's exactly what the Alter Rebbe is going to explain in today's Tanya shir. Explaining as we get close to Rosh Hashanah, the Alter Rebbe explains here what happens on Rosh Hashanah. We spoke a little bit about it yesterday. We're going to talk a little more, a little deeper. Today's class, what happens on Rosh Hashanah with the sounding of the shofar. And Alter Rebbe says that every year there is a new light that comes down. Hashem created the world, and by the way He created the world is that in a way that every year when it comes Rosh Hashanah, the energy, the desire that Hashem has to create this world sort of goes back, retrieves the desire, and we need to reawaken the desire. And we're going to talk about what Alter Rebbe brings in parentheses in today's lesson, about the concept what is called the Nesira. And Nesira means sort of a surgery, excision that takes place on the eve of Rosh Hashanah. To understand it a little bit, it is connected with what it says in the Torah about when Hashem created Adam, and then the Torah says Hashem put him to sleep, and he performed a kind of surgery on Adam, and the surgery was to make sure to separate, as the Medrash tells us, the Gemara says, to separate Adam and Eve. Says that they were created, Adam and Eve were created as people that were connected back to back. And they were one. And then Hashem separated them, He put them to sleep, He separated them, and then they were able to reunite, not back to back, but face to face. And this process is called the Nesira, the separation, or the surgery that is happening. Says the Alter Rebbe that this concept of the Nesira, the separation, is also something that happens every single year when it comes Rosh Hashanah. On the night of Rosh Hashanah, there is the removal of the will of Hashem that animates the world, and it remains only a remnant of the energy that Hashem gives. It's sort of like when a person sleeps, not all of the faculties is functioning. There is some kind of life, but it's not a real full life. And that's in the eve of Rosh Hashanah. The world is like, it's called in dormita, a state of sleep. And we need to get Hashem to reintroduce Hashem's desire and to give us the life once again. And that is through our prayers and throughout the sounding of the shofar, which comes from the depth of the heart, accepting Hashem as king and asking Hashem, Eloch al kol olam kuloi, that to be king on the entire world. And this brings about a great light that comes from Hashem, Now, this light that comes is a light which is not the same light that happened last year. We just reintroduce it. It is a much greater and deeper level, something that never happened before. And every year, again and again, it happens again and again. Every year we ask Hashem, and we introduce a deeper light from Hashem. So every year we reach up higher and higher. The Mezritcher Magid gives an example of understanding a little bit the concept of this union, which there was the separation and then reunification. So he brings an example of a teacher who teaches a student. Sometimes a teacher teaches a student, and the student receives and is connected, but is connected only with the exterior part of the teacher's teachings. He can repeat the words. He can say, he can repeat the words and then understand as much as he understands. But then there is the separation. And the separation is something that leads to the student to be able to really take in what the teacher taught him and bring out a new understanding, something that he can bring out in his own words. So you don't just repeat the words of the teacher, but you can bring out something that you really internalized and created new and deeper understandings. Of course, everything based on the teacher's teachings. And the same thing is what happened with Adam and Eve. They were created as one, united, but it's back to back. There wasn't an inner connection. Hashem separated them and then reintroduced them. They were reintroduced face to face, and thereby they were able to reconnect in a much deeper way and thereby be able to produce new life into this world. So this is, and the Kabbalah explains that this concept of the Nesira, what happened with Adam and Eve, represents the spiritual levels of unifications between the higher worlds and the lower worlds. And in Rosh Hashanah, it's called the Binyan HaMalchus. We need to rebuild the Malchus, the level, the energy that comes from Hashem, and bring it down into this world. And this, says the Alter Rebbe, happens every year in Rosh Hashanah. And when it happens, it comes down from the spiritual world, is connected into this physical world. Where in the physical world is it centralized? It is centralized in the Holy Land in Israel. And you give, and in order to bring that light, to bring it out in a revealed way, it is through our actions that we act in a similar way of giving. And that is the letter that the Alter Rebbe talks about here, is about the giving to the tzedakah, especially to the tzedakah that the Alter Rebbe was collecting for Eretz Israel, the Holy Land. So the Alter Rebbe, when you give more and more and more every year, you bring about the revelation of that light that comes every year again and again in a greater level. Just like you add, there is the greater level of light that will be revealed through your giving in addition to what you gave before. So let's see this beautiful lesson, what the Alter Rebbe says. And that's perfect that as we come close to Rosh Hashanah, so we understand how we prepare to Rosh Hashanah. Says the Alter Rebbe. Uvechol shana v'shana yired meir mechachma ilo oir chodesh u'mechudash shelo yoya meir adayin me'olam le'oretz ha'elyonim. And every year there descends a radiance, a new and renewed light, which has never yet shone, from the supreme Chachma to the Eretz Elyon, the higher Eretz. Chachma is the wisdom, the top level of Atzilus, and it comes down to Eretz Elyon, the higher land, which is called the Malchus of Atzilus. And the Alter Rebbe explains what we just said. Ki oyer kol shana v'shana mistalek l'sharoshay b'chol erev Rosh Hashanah. For the light of every year withdraws to its source in the essence of the Ein Sof on the eve of every Rosh Hashanah. The light withdraws. Keshe Hakodesh miskase boy, when the moon is covered. Rosh Hashanah is a holiday that is in the beginning of the month when the moon is concealed. And that the moon represents the Malchus. The Malchus is the energy that comes from Hashem to bring life to the world, and that is concealed. We don't see the moon, it is concealed. Because the desire of Hashem is elevated, and we need to draw it down again. The desire of Hashem to bring that life to this world. And this is done through the shofar and prayers. Afterwards, by means of the sounding of the shofar and by means of the prayers, a new and superior light is elicited. Where does it come from? A light of a yet higher rank in the sphere of the supreme Chachma, the level of Chachma of Atzilus, to radiate to the Eretz Elyon, the higher land, and those who dwell upon it. And what is it? Alter Rebbe explains, meaning all the higher and lower worlds that receive their vitality from it. Meaning from the infinite Ein Sof light and from God's Chachma, which is vested in it in the higher land. Again, this refers to the Malchus of Atzilus. As it is written, for with you is the source of life, in your light shall we see light. This refers to the light that radiates from the supreme Chachma, the source of life. And in this parenthesis, the Alter Rebbe introduces this concept we explained before, the concept of the excision, what happens, the surgery that takes place on Rosh Hashanah. As is known to the scholars of the hidden wisdom, the Kabbalists, that every Rosh Hashanah, the Nesira takes place, and the Sphira of Malchus receives new, more sublime Moichin. The Nesira is the excision, sublime Moichin, the spiritual, godly energy, which is from the spiritual intellect, and so on. And he explains this is a Kabbalist theme regarding the rebuilding of the Sphira of Malchus. We need to rebuild the Malchus, the source of energy of this world and all of the worlds. That takes place every Rosh Hashanah. The paradigm of this sequence is the slumber that God brought upon Adam on the day of his creation, which took place on the day of Rosh Hashanah. This is why we celebrate Rosh Hashanah on that day. That's where we spoke about it yesterday. Why do we pick a random day to begin the year? It's not a random day. That is the day that Adam was created, and that is the day that this process took place. Hashem placed the sleep upon him and separated him and reunited him with Chava on the day of Rosh Hashanah, and the subsequent excision, the Nesira of the rib from which Eve was then formed. Some say it's the rib. Tzela. Tzela also means the side. That's why the opinion that says that there were two faces, but just different sides that were back to back, and Hashem separated them and reintroduced them face to face. So the Kabbalah explains that Adam is a terrestrial echo of a supernal man, meaning the bracket of sphere is known collectively as Za, acronym of Ze'er Ampin, of the world of Atzilus. Slumber alludes to the withdrawal of the supernal intellectual attributes, or moichin, from Za, just as man's intellect withdraws during sleep. The new and more sublime moichin, which are then drawn down into Malchus, are far superior to the moichin that Malchus had previously received from Za. So this is the Kabbalistic terms. I'm not going to go now into explain everything, but this is the idea that we said in general with the metaphor of the teacher and the student and so on. Since the Alter Rebbe continues, not only does it happen on Rosh Hashanah, but really on a smaller scale, this happens also on a daily basis. In a very specific way, this takes place every day. More sublime moichin are elicited by every morning prayer. When you do the morning prayer, you receive a new intellectual energy. They are not the original moichin that withdrew after the prayer of the previous day, but there are more sublime ones, the higher ones. And in general terms, says the Alter Rebbe, with respect to the world as a whole, and not only with regard to the daily elicitation of new moichin during prayer as experienced by an individual man, during the 6,000 years of the world's existence, this occurs every Rosh Hashanah. And thereby the Alter Rebbe explains the verse, what the Alter Rebbe asked in the beginning of this letter, that it says in the Torah that the land of Israel is Eretz Asher Tomid Einei Hashem Elokecha Bo Mereshis Hashana V'Ad Achris Shana. The land that the eyes of Hashem is in there, in them, in this land, from the always, constantly, from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. And the Alter Rebbe asks, if it's constant, why do you have to say from the beginning of the year and the end of the year? It's constant, that's it. And that's what Alter Rebbe explains, that every year there is a new light that comes and a greater light that comes. So it's constant, but it comes, the Einei Hashem, the eyes of Hashem is in there constantly and every year again and again. And now what is the eyes of Hashem? What does this refers to? Alter Rebbe says the eyes refers to Chochmah, the wisdom, the light of the wisdom. Now, what is the connection between the eyes and light of wisdom? Because the wisdom, what is the wisdom? Wisdom is the light, the way you see, the way it's revealed completely. We say there's a difference between hearing and seeing. You cannot compare. Seeing is believing, as the saying goes. When you see something, you have everything and you know everything. When you hear something, you don't have it clear. The wisdom represents the seeing, the eyes that sees everything completely. And this is, says the Alter Rebbe, why this is called the Einei Hashem Elokecha Bo, the eyes of Hashem, the Chochmah of Hashem, the revealed level of godliness is in the land of Israel. This is the meaning of the above quoted verse. Forever the eyes of the Lord is upon, the Lord your God is upon it. Because the eyes is the epithet for the efflux and radiance of the light of Chachma. For which reason sages are referred to as the eyes of the congregation. Why are they called the eyes of the congregation? Because they are illuminated by the light of Chachma, which is known by the epithet eyes. And this too is the meaning of the teaching, that the atmosphere of the land of Israel makes one wise. Why? Because the land of Israel too is illuminated by Chachma. We know what the Gemara tells us. One of the great sages, Rabbi Zera, he lived in Babylon, and then he came to the land of Israel. And in order to understand the teachings, the way they was taught in Israel, was in a much, much higher level than the way it was taught in Babylon. Rabbi Zera he needed to fast 40 days in order to forget the methods of teachings of Babylon, in order to adopt the new methods of the teachings in Israel. The teachings, and we can see it also in the Talmudic, the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud. The Babylonian Talmud is full with questions and answers and arguments. The Jerusalem Talmud is straight light, telling you the way it is. The Gemara says that the teachings of the Babylonian Talmud is referred to in the verse. It says, "B'machashaki meishivani." He placed me in darkness. The example that is given, that when you're coming into a room which there is no light, and you want to see what's in the room, you have to go from place to place, from table to see what is a cup and what is a table, what is a chair, what is a spoon, and what is a fork, and you have to see, you have to go your way by touching and feeling and asking, and it's a very confusing thing. You get the picture ultimately, but is that you're in the darkness. But if you go into a light, and if someone turns the light on, all of a sudden you see everything is clear. You don't have to ask, you don't have to touch, you don't have to move. There is clarity. It's a whole different level. So this is says the Alter Rebbe, is the connection of the land of Israel. In Israel, there has this light of Hashem in the way of Chachma, the wisdom. And that is why the Alter Rebbe concludes, is the giving to the tzedakah to Eretz Yisrael is so great. Continues the Alter Rebbe and says, this light, Afshit midis, this radiance and a flux, though it is continuous. Nevertheless, it is not only one and the same plane and level since the beginning of the world. It's not one plan Hashem had. Hashem could have easily make a plan for the next 5,000 years. That's what I want to give. Surely knows what's going to happen in 5,000 years from now. But yet Hashem didn't do it that way. He did it every year. It should be renewed. Rather, every year there is a new and superior light. Because the light which is generated and which shone on this Rosh Hashanah withdraws to its source on the eve of the next Rosh Hashanah. This enables us to understand the verse that says that the eyes of God are upon the land from the beginning of the year to the end of the year only. It's 1 year at a time. Now, says the Alter Rebbe, is another interesting concept that we can understand here. The reason why the word Mereshit from the beginning seems like it's spelled not usually. Sounds like it looks like a mistake, misspelled. But obviously, the Torah, nothing is a mistake. Every word is precise. Every letter is precise. But this word, mereshit, is missing an aleph. It says, "V'lachein ksiv mereshit chaser aleph." The way reshit is spelled is reish, aleph, shin, yud, taf. Here in the Torah, it's spelled reish, shin, yud, taf. It's missing an aleph. And this is why mereshit from the beginning is written without an aleph. It says, this alludes to the withdrawal of the light signified by the aleph, which withdraws on the night of Rosh Hashanah. But it's interesting also, the word reshit with the aleph, reshit, could sound rashit. Rash means poor. At the beginning, it's poor, it's missing something, it's lacking the energy. So in the eve of every Rosh Hashanah, that energy that Hashem gives the entire world is missing. We're in a state of limbo. And we need to re-encourage Hashem, so to speak, to bring down the new light that comes this year, and new light and a greater light. And when is it happening? Says the Alter Rebbe, ad acharat kiyas. The removal of the light, the withdrawal of the light, is until after the sounding of the shofar. When there descends a new and more sublime light that has never yet shone since the beginning of the world. Now this light, this new light, is vested itself and conceals itself, in the Eretz HaChaim, the land of life, which is above, meaning the Malchus of Atzilus, the source of all the worlds and the created beings, and in the Eretz HaChaim, which is below. This is the land of Israel. That is where it hides there. And this and there is lahachyes is kol meshach shana zu, in order to animate all the worlds for the duration of this year, of that year. So that light hides, and we need to reveal this light. How do we reveal that light? Says the Alter Rebbe, ach giluyoy mehester hazeh. Its manifestation, however, the light became concealed in the Eretz HaChaim, in the land of light above and below. Above, again, is Malchus of Atzilus, below is the land of Israel. The revelation of this light and the descent of a creative life force to the world and all its created beings depends on what? On our actions. It depends on the action of those below and on their merits, meaning all the good things that we do right now, and penitence during the 10 days of penitence between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We have 10 days of penitence, which bring down this light and brings it to a revealed way. This will suffice for the initiated, and that's why the Alter Rebbe wrote this letter to encourage the people to give the tzedakah, and especially for Eretz Israel. This is important also to give tzedakah. If you, wherever you see the video, you should listen to the class, to give tzedakah. All of us collectively, this tzedakah that we give is something that brings this bracha. What we see from this lesson is really, really a powerful lesson. Now we understand, first of all, what is happening on Rosh Hashanah. Our prayers, our sounding of the shofar, our acceptance as God as King, this brings the desire in Hashem to give us new life for this year and a greater life. And every year it becomes greater and greater, bigger and bigger. As the saying one said, it says that Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, he said that the Welt wird besser and besser. The world becomes better and better. which is a statement that if you look around you, seems like the opposite is maybe true. But the truth is, I mean, when you see around, you see all kind of lawlessness and darkness, spiritual darkness. But the truth is that even though on one end we see that the yerida sadeiras, the descent of the generations, but yet you see the light coming out, shining again. As I remember, as a young child, growing up, when we saw a person who was not religious, became Baal Teshuva, it was like a headline in the newspapers, and people, it was a very rare thing to see people who came from the outside, secular world, into adopting a more religious way of life. Returning to Hashem was a very rare thing. Today, Baruch Hashem, you have thousands and thousands and thousands of people who come back to Yiddishkeit. So yes, it's world of darkness, but we see that the world, there is the excision, there is the separation, but yet the turning face to face, and more people look and seek and connecting and reconnecting to Hashem. And this will bring us that this year, Tafshin Pei Gimel, which is coming up, which should be the Heishnas Pelois Gedolos, the great miracles, and we should be zeicha to this great light, to be able to appreciate this light of Hashem, especially it is a Shnas Hakel, a year of gathering, which we will be talking about it in the future lessons of Minutes Hashem. Okay, have a wonderful day, everyone, and a good Shabbos, and we'll see you B'ezrat Hashem on Sunday. Any questions?